That sounds about as sure as you're going to be. Welcome back to the Project Gen X podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Alan Smith, along with...
I think I'm still big here.
And this episode, we decided...
decided.
This was an on-the-fly. We need some episodes, and
You decided.
I was on Max the other night, and I was flipping through, like looking at what was available or what was on there and all that kind of stuff. And this movie popped up, which is 1981's Time Bandits. I remember watching this movie when I was a kid.
And I as a kid, I totally did not understand this movie.
And no, I did not as a kid. I also determined while I was watching this movie that I probably have not seen this movie in 40 years because I forgot a ton of stuff that happened in this.
Yeah.
There were some things I remember, but then I couldn't remember, well, how did we get to this? And I completely forgot about some other stuff, like completely forgot about other things.
Watching it again this time around and having done I did a little reading on it before I watched it and realized it's a Terry Gilliam
movie. I knew that.
I was like, oh.
Makes perfect sense.
It's a Monty Python adjacent.
It is. And that's why you have all the Monty Python guys in it.
Then once I realized that, the movie made more sense.
Okay, so Time Bandits was released November 6th, 1981.
Yeah.
Let's see, what do we got here? It had a budget of $5 million. Opening weekend in the U.S. and Canada, it made $6.5 million. Had a total gross of $42 million in the U.S. and Canada, and worldwide. Apparently, it's the same amount on all of it. So it made its money back. Plus, it did well, and I made 8 times its money. Its money back
Eventually.
So, yeah. But I mean, that's especially adjust that out for now, $42 million. Well, let's see. The last time I checked, it's been a couple of years, but early 80s money to now is about 3 times. So that's showing that it would have had about a $15 million budget.
Yeah.
And it would have made about $120 million. That's a pretty good haul.
Yeah, that's not bad.
Now, the budget would have been a whole lot more now than even the 15 for this movie. What did you think about this movie? What did you think about Time Bandits? Okay. Oh, wait a second. Before we do anything, let's run down the cast real quick. Okay.
Yeah.
I completely forgot Sean Connery was in this movie.
Did you
I know
really?
he's not in it for very long, but when I saw his
longer than you think.
When I saw his name come up at the beginning, I was like, Sean Connery. What does Sean Connery play in this? And then I was like, oh, that's Sean Connery. Okay, because again, I had not seen this movie in a very long time.
Well, you also had Kenny Baker.
Yeah. Well, we have Shelley Duvall, John Cleese, Katherine Hellman, Ian Holm, Michael Palin, Ralph Richardson, Peter Vaughn, David Warner, David Rappaport, Kenny Baker. Then we're getting into the what did they call themselves? The Time Bandits. I forget what they called themselves. Anyways, but yeah, it's Malcolm Dixon, Mike Edmonds, Jack Purvis, Tiny Ross.
Yeah.
And then you had Craig Warnock playing Kevin, the kid that's kind of the main character here. Let's see, who else am I missing here? Am I missing anybody else of real? I'm sure I am. I'm just kind of going through because there's a lot of people in this movie. I mean, it's got a large cast.
Yeah.
I love the fact that David Warner plays basically the devil in this. And it was one of those things that I, for whatever reason, always associate this movie with Tron for some reason. And then, of course, David Warner played, he was in Tron, he played Ed Dillinger, but he also played, was it Sark? Is that who it was that he played? It was inside the computer,
Yeah.
Sark, yeah. And the Master also played the Master Control. And I think the reason why I associate this movie with Tron This came out in 81. Tron came out in 82.
Yeah.
I remember watching both of those movies for the first time at my Aunt Mary's house. Was rented them from the video store.
Yeah.
Probably rented them both at the same time, and so that's probably why I always put the two movies together.
Makes sense.
I vividly remember watching them on their early 80s big screen TV. That was that.
Yeah, that's something we never talked about with the VHS episode. Is that certain movies for us are completely and totally tied to other movies.
Yes.
Simply because they were in the stack
or
of
a place.
They were part of the 2 or 3 movies that got rented that weekend.
Yep.
And you watched them back to back to back, so they're inherently tied to each other
Yes.
because of that.
Yes, and these two, Tron and Time Bandits, are tied together.
Yeah.
For me with that. Like I said, at my Aunt Mary's house, sitting there watching it in the middle of the day for whatever reason, as a photo of my mom, and also the 1976 King Kong is tied to that as well. And I know that was probably before we got our first VCR, because they had a VCR and we didn't have one yet. Now we got one shortly thereafter, but that
for some reason this movie. It is going to sound absolutely preposterous. For some reason, this movie and Ice Pirates. I can see that. I was always getting mixed up in my head which one was which.
I can see that. It's funny because, when I sat down to watch this movie last night, I kept getting this memory in my head of all of them going through time, like they were getting older, and all this stuff. And I was like, no, that was Ice Pirates.
Yeah.
But I know but when I started watching it, I realized what it was. It's when they start pushing the wall in the bedroom. I was like, oh, okay. This is what I was trying to remember. I remember there was something to do with they were all going down this long corridor,
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was like, for some reason in my head, those two movies are tied together, and I'm always jumbling up their storylines.
I did the same thing with with those movies as well. Probably because I saw Ice Pirates around the same time.
Yeah.
I forget what year Ice Pirates came out. It was somewhere in the early 80s.
Oh my!
But it was the whole. Yeah, there are quite a few of those. It was kind of like a couple of years ago when we were doing Retro Summer, when we went back and rewatched
84.
We went back and rewatched The Neverending Story, and all of us were like, this is not the same movie I remember watching when I was a kid. It was like, wait, no, this is not the movie I remember at all. It's like I somewhere in my head rewrote this movie into a much better movie. It's like
Exactly.
And this one,
once I realized that this was Monty Python adjacent, then things started falling into place.
I had forgotten that forever, because I remember John Cleese being Robin Hood, and I knew that Terry Gilliam had directed it, and which was like, and this is very much a Terry Gilliam movie.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this is right. The longer I watched this movie went on throughout the I guess what was about hour and a half long.
No, it was like an hour 51.
Somewhere in there. The longer it went, the more I was like, oh, I see Brazil. I see Baron Munchausen. I see. Well, it was just like all these movies. Like, yep, it's all right there.
Well, here's the thing: he was shopping Brazil around, and he couldn't get anybody to bite on it. So he's like, all right, let's start with a family adventure.
Yeah,
and he actually refers to this movie, Brazil and the Adventures of Baron Munchausen, as his series of imagination. Or something like that.
It just.
Trilogy of imagination.
The thing is, like all those movies. Yeah. Did you like this movie rewatching it?
It was okay.
That was kind of I was like,
I didn't enjoy it as much as I enjoyed Brazil.
Yeah.
Brazil is just over the top.
Did not like this movie as much as I remembered liking it when I was a kid. Now, I think also the fact that when you're a kid and watch stuff, everything is kind of, or at least for us during our when we were kids, the era that we were kids in, it's one of those things where you're like, all this stuff is bigger than life, and it's just so cool. And it's
also there were parts of this movie where it's literally there's There's no dialogue going on. You're just kind of following them through the landscape and looking at stuff.
Right.
And it's like, oh, that's interesting.
Right.
Wow, that's weird.
You know, I remembered that.
But there's like large swaths of like no dialogue.
Yeah. Before I sat down, I was trying to remember what this movie was about, and I couldn't at all. And the things that came to me in my memory of this movie was that what we talked about. I was like, I knew there was something to do with a long corridor and them all going down it. And again, I was getting that Ice Pirates thing in there. I remembered they never call him the devil. He's called the evil genius.
Yeah.
But I remembered his speech about if I were God, I wouldn't. Why would you make slugs or whatever? Why would you do computers? Computers is what you would start with. This is technology is the thing. I remembered that, and I remembered what happened to his parents at the end, and that the fireman was someone from before, but I did not realize it was Sean Connery.
Right.
You know, that was the whole like, okay, you know, I just, again,
I
had not seen
all
the
the
movie.
Polaroids in his bag.
Yeah, and I remember as the movie went along, I remembered the Polaroids. I was like, oh yeah, you know, but I couldn't remember how the evil got into the house, you know, at the end of it. It's like, I knew there were these pieces of evil, but I can't remember exactly how or why it all happened or anything. And I completely forgot about
the downer ending.
Well, no, I remembered the downer ending. I remembered that part. I did remember that part, believe me. What I didn't remember was him going to bed and a horse jumping over, you know, a knight on a horseback. I forgot about all that stuff. And then it started coming back to me a little more of like, okay, I like the fact that this gets into the story almost immediately. Yeah. I mean, literally, we're what, 5 minutes into the movie and we're getting into the movie of, okay, this is what it's going to be. And I like that because if this had taken a long time for setup, I don't know that I could have rewatched all of it.
You're not wrong. You're not wrong.
I also remembered the Robin Hood stuff. For whatever reason, that was the thing that stood out to me when I was a kid, you know, was that Robin Hood was an idiot and that, you know, the whole robbing the rich and like every time they give them, they would give the poor something and then the one guy will punch them every time. He's like, is that really necessary? Oh, he says it is. Oh okay.
I think I remembered the Sean Connery part more than you.
Oh yeah. See, I didn't remember any of that
but I remember going, oh, it's James Bond.
Yeah. That was so. Again, I would have seen this movie probably in 80. Probably in 83.
Yeah.
Honestly, thinking about it. And because I know we did not go to the theater to see it. Now I heard people had told me about it who had gone and seen it. My cousins being one of them. But I had not. Yeah, it was like I said, because I remember watching this and Tron at the same, you know, relatively around the same time. And I know Tron came out in 82. And I think that was like late in 82, wasn't it, or something like that?
I think so.
If I'm not mistaken. So it probably would have been 83 sometime when they finally hit home video that I rented both of them and watched them. So yeah, I would have been like 9. And so I was not getting a lot of what this movie was doing, you know, and so, and I also at that age didn't quite have Sean Connery's James Bond. You know, I'm sure that I had seen some James Bond stuff because my dad loved that stuff. You know, they would come on television, but I had never really paid that much attention to it. Roger Moore was James Bond to me, you know, at that point, because that's who was James Bond.
Yeah, but my family made sure we knew that Sean Connery was James Bond.
There's that type of stuff that I'm going to let you try to tell what's going on here.
Why me? I barely remembered this movie. It was like, oh, okay, why? Yeah, if you want to do this one, okay.
So we have a group.
You've got you. The movie opens up with a family,
and they're modern house
in England somewhere.
Yes, yeah.
And the dad, of course, is checked out. The mom is watching TV with some show, and the show is Your Money or Your Life.
Yes, I know. I did like that.
They're
that was
literally like, you can win a prize or we can kill you.
Right, pretty much.
And they're basically killing people on TV. Mm-hmm. And of course, you've got the history buff kid, and the parents are.
The mom is more concerned with the appliances in the house.
Yeah,
they did the. Because there's that commercial for the...
no, that's the prize that they're trying to win on the show.
Yeah, it was like, it'll cook a meal in 10 seconds or something.
Yeah.
She's talking about somebody down the street has the one that does it in 8 or whatever. And
from Ice Cube to beef bouillon or something
in 8
like
seconds or whatever. And really... And it's funny how, like, all of that stuff comes back later.
Yeah.
Of all of the appliances. Like, you know, at the end of the movie when the house is on fire, they pulled out, and they're... The mom's more concerned about her appliances that are being than
the rest of the house,
than everything, even the kid for that matter. You know,
well, the parents left the kid in the house.
I know they got out, and it's just like
do we have a kid?
I know that's yeah. This was a completely checked out boomer kid. Parents, like the kids on their own. You know,
but. Basically, they're like, go to bed. We're tired of looking at you. Go to bed. Mm-hmm. And of course, he's interrupting their TV show with, did you know?
Yeah.
Did you know? Mm-hmm. Did you know? Shut up and go to bed.
Right.
And that's when we get the horse jumping through.
Right.
And we're like, okay, a horse just jumped through his wardrobe and across the bed.
And then they're all of a sudden in medieval England.
Well, no.
Yep. No. They were for a second.
Kind of.
Yeah, because remember, it shows the bed in the forest.
Okay, you're right.
And then his dad comes in and everything's back to normal.
And, of course, the dad heard the noise and all that.
Right.
So you got to wonder, did he really hear that or did it really happen? And I'm starting to get the feeling that his bedroom was some kind of a nexus in the time.
What I gathered from watching it this time, you know, the map.
Yeah.
They had this time.
Of the time portals.
And there was a portal that came through his bedroom.
Yeah.
That was like, came out of his wardrobe. And apparently the other way out was through the wall.
Yeah.
And it was, so yeah. And of course he had studied all this stuff. So when the night comes through, he's looking at all of his posters and everything and his drawings, and he's like, well, what's going to happen next, you know? And
yeah, so he gets ready with snacks and the flashlight.
Got a flashlight and his Polaroid camera.
Yep.
And
gets ready, and then here comes
the six dwarves. And
they didn't have 7.
No, they had 6. Yes, they did. And what would I go? Here was like the one thing I would say, because the previous night his dad came in and was talking about the noise.
Yeah.
Okay. When these guys come in, first off, one of them shoots off a Tommy gun.
Yeah, and nothing.
And then they go and they knock down the shelves and everything hits the floor and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, and the parents never once come in to check anything. Plus, they're yelling and screaming, and then God comes through the room and they push the wall and fall into another time portal and just.
And who knows how long the kid's been gone?
Yeah, I know. There's that. You know, they kind of infer that all happened. That him waking up to the fire is the same night that he went to bed.
Yeah,
I kind of got that was, and that was kind of the whole. Hey, was that whole thing a dream? Which there's a lot of dream logic that happens in this movie.
Yeah,
but then when he gets outside, he sees Sean Connery. And then he also reaches in and pulls out all the Polaroids.
Yeah.
And so he's like, oh, hey, wait a second here. This is, so.
But they end up in wartime somewhere with Napoleon.
Because Napoleon, they were in.
I guess they were in France because they were doing the whole Punch and Judy thing.
Yeah. He said what city they were outside of when they fell through. I can't remember.
Yeah, I don't remember.
But they before they do that, they're explaining that they were bandits.
Yeah.
That they stole this map and they were off to steal a bunch of treasure. They were that was the whole thing they were looking.
Which they had never done before because they had just now gotten their hands on the map because they had been busy working for the Supreme Being.
I was going to say, did you catch what their job was with the Supreme Being?
He was basically,
which was funny because they said supreme being,
yeah.
and he was like God, and they're like, well, we don't know him well enough to call him by his name or whatever it was. It was kind of one of the, but yeah, they were involved with creation. Like they talked about, we're the ones that, we God said you wanted all this stuff done, and so we went and made it.
Yeah.
Until one of them made some kind of weird tree that was like, what did they say? It was neon pink and it smelled horribly or something. And then they got downgraded to something else, and it was just, that's when they stole the time map.
Yeah.
And I kind of liked that, all of that stuff, like the whole God and the devil, the way that they were kind of portrayed in this.
Yeah.
And that they went through all this time stuff, but they were also very much, because like when he goes to Greece,
yeah,
when he falls, and when Sean Connery's his king, after what his character's name was, the king is fighting the Minotaur, which I thought was pretty cool that they actually had a Minotaur. I completely forgot about that when I was watching it. And he asked him, he's like, the gods must have sent you which one. He starts naming all of them. Was it Zeus? Was it Hera? Was it Apollo? Was it, going through all this stuff? Yeah. And it's just like, no. It's like, what do they call you, Kevin? It's like, Kevin. Okay, all right, and then, he winds up going back with him to the city, and he adopts him, and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, no, this was actually kind of cool. I like this. This is its own movie right here. This could be its own movie. And of course the kid doesn't want to leave because he finally has the father that he always wanted. Yeah. And the excitement, the adventure and everything. And then they come and steal him back, and it's like, he's like, the whole time he's like, no, I don't want to go. I don't want to go.
Leave me here.
Leave me here. And
of course they rob everybody at the port where they're adopting him.
Right. Yeah. Well, that was the same before that. They robbed Napoleon. Yeah. They got him drunk and then stole all of his stuff, and then
it ended up with Robin Hood. With Robin Hood. Robin Hood robbed them.
Yes. And this is where, like, Shelley Duvall and what was the other guy? They make two different appearances as different characters, and
it was
hold on. I can't remember his name. Yeah. Okay. My question: what was his problem? I was trying to figure that out. I was like, okay, what is his problem? Because she asked him. He said it's been 12 years, and
it was Pansy and Vincent.
Yeah.
Michael Palin.
That's who it was.
Yeah.
And he was like, she asked, do you still have the problem? He's like, no, I don't have the problem anymore. He goes, well, do you have to wear no, I don't have to wear it any longer. And then, but it was funny because, like, when they're tied to the tree,
yeah,
he says the problem's back, and then he says, I need some fruit. I was like, what's the problem? I know the initial problem I was thinking was ED, but then I was like, wait a second, why would you have to why would do this and that and whatever? And it's just like, I don't know. I think it was just written for
comedic.
Yeah, we'll just throw this in there and let people think whatever it is. But then they reappear when they're back on the Titanic later. Yeah. And he's got like this big weird thing on his nose. Yeah. And he's wearing a toupee, and she doesn't know it until it gets ripped off. And that's the thing that sends her. Shelley Duvall's always been weird. Just
Yep.
And she always took like really weird roles, it just, this or Popeye or well, hell, even in The Shining. I mean,
that ash.
Yeah.
In The Shining. It's like, how long is that ash going to hold on until it finally falls off?
There's all kinds of just, I've never, and I don't know if you see anything with her in recent years. Mm-hmm. Like, she got some real mental health problems, like, real problems, and I'm sure it has nothing to do with Stanley Kubrick whatsoever, because he tortured her on that set.
Yeah,
tortured her. But yeah, it's.
But it's just
going from one. Yeah, you said they went from Robin Hood to Greece. Yeah, he went to Greece after that, and then they went from Greece to the Titanic.
Yeah.
And then they went from the Titanic to the, what would they call it, the Time of Legends.
Yeah, the Time of Legends.
Which was completely made up. That was whenever evil genius.
Well, then you get
was telling him about this.
You get the org with his murderous wife.
Right.
On the ship.
Right. And the whole, okay. I had completely forgotten about until it started happening. I'm like, oh yeah, this is kind of an iconic thing from this movie. When come to find out, the ship is actually a hat for a giant thing, And I'm like, I completely forgot about this until right this second. And it's like, how do you forget this? Because that's kind of, it really is an iconic moment from this movie when you think about things. And that was... That when you get to the time of, or whatever they call it, the time of legends or whatever, kingdom of legends, whatever they call it, it was completely made up that the evil genius,
because that's where the dark castle,
right? They were going to go steal the most precious item or whatever it is, and that's when this movie really goes full Terry Gilliam.
Yes,
starting at this point, and it just, especially when you get down to the final battle. And then all of a sudden,
well, if you've noticed, you get like full on MC Escher-esque landscapes, but if you really look at it, it's all made out of Lego.
Okay.
If you really look at it, all that little stuff that was built on, you'll notice the big 6 Lego dots on top of a lot of it.
Again, kind of goes back to the whole dream logic. Because remember him looking at his floor, and there was Lego, and there were knights and horses, and there was army men, which we get here. There's all this stuff, which again kind of goes back to that whole. Is this really happening, or is this something he's dreaming?
You also get a piece of this that is kind of a minor meme with the cow skull phantoms that were chasing him around. They were shooting the rockets out of the eyes and all of that, which was really kind of a minor horoscope.
There are,
and I don't mean it as in like Pisces.
Yeah, I know. There are multiple parts of this movie that are very, a child would be very terrified of some of this stuff. And those things right there with when the one dwarf gets turned into a pig.
Yeah, half pig.
A half pig, and then a full pig eventually, but just the half pig was enough. When they get captured, and they're put in that
cage over the bottom
cage of the bottomless pit.
Yeah,
and their whole rescue, the way that they got out of it and everything was I could see that being pretty intense for kids. Of course, I don't. I didn't really remember any of it. Again, I have not seen this movie in 40 years. And yeah, it's there. Oh, I'm going to go back to the Titanic. Titanic sure did sink very quickly.
Yep. Did you notice they were all hanging onto a door?
Yeah, I know. I did see that.
And there was room for all seven of them.
All 7 of them. I know.
Yeah.
So, yeah. But no, that was...
Give it up, Rose. Jack couldn't fit on the door.
Absolutely. But that was funny, though, just as we hit an iceberg, and then 2 seconds later, they're in the water, and it's like, wait a second.
Yeah. No,
it took hours for that thing to sink.
Wait a minute. You don't think that's where they pulled the door for it?
Who knows? You never know.
It
very well could be.
That would have been a great callback to the Terry Gilliam thing.
It very well could be. Just knowing James Cameron and his love of cinema. But once you get to when you get in and you meet the ogre and Katherine Hellman, Mona from Who's the Boss, as well as so many other things. I loved her. She was great. I mean, and she was no nonsense. We're going to kill them and eat them. And the way that all of that went about with them getting thrown overboard and everything just...
And then suddenly the giant walks out of the water.
Yeah, with them on top of it. And he crushes that house and everybody in it. And he's like, wow, you not only killed the people, you killed the kid that was crying too.
Yeah.
Wow. It's like, yep, it's a Terry Gilliam movie. So...
And of course, they're in the boat. They've pulled up the boards and they're jamming needles in this giant
had a skull. Sleeping potion. Yeah. They used a bellow. They jammed it in. It's like, and then all of a sudden he got sleepy. He took off the hat and set it down, and it's like, oh, okay. There was a little bit with that because remember they get when they throw the ogre off, he bellows really one good time and sends them moving with his breath. And then they put the sail down because they're going too fast or something. And then all of a sudden, the giant pulls them up out of the water. I'm like, okay, wait. Was he, because the way when he took it off, it was a hat that he was wearing.
Right.
Okay. If their ship was a hat with the giant underneath it, then the wind wouldn't have affected anything here. And it just, I guess this is the middle-aged me looking at this going, wait a second, there's some, again, dream logic. It's what you just have to go with. No, it's just all dream logic.
You just look at it and go, Monty Python.
Yeah, and there's that. Terry Gilliam. Yeah. I mean, that's this isn't a Monty Python. I mean, it's got the guys from Monty Python.
It's not a Monty Python movie.
Right.
It's very adjacent. But it's because it's Terry Gilliam, it's got that same weirdness.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and of course he brings in his buddies to be in it. Yeah. But it's not like...
And it was even...
But it's not like,
And like all the Monty Python stuff, it was half produced by George Harrison.
Oh, George Harrison did all the music on this.
Not only...
He was executive producer on this movie.
Yeah.
He also did all the music. The song at the end of the movie is George Harrison.
But he didn't do it until... Gilliam harangued him into doing it. And if you listen to the final song, there's actually lines in there about how bad about how the movie was not very well made and how Gilliam was kind of a pain in the butt.
It kind of, as I was listening to the song, it kind of seemed like it just went into nonsense every once in a while, just kind of gibberish, whatever. Yeah. The song itself seemed pretty cool, but I did notice because I watched the credits all the way through because they had like the still frames in the background and stuff. Yeah. And I noticed that George Harrison was an executive producer on the movie, and then I also noticed that he did all of the music in it. So
it was the guy who was trying to get it made had actually set up these studios that were used for George Harrison as kind of like his, an investment type deal. And so they were on George Harrison's studio lot.
Okay.
They were using his equipment. Of course, Harrison was a big Monty Python fan and had actually financed Holy Grail.
Right.
Because that was the only way they were going to get it made. And so he, once again, helped finance it and get it made.
Well, it did well at the theater, so, especially comparatively. So, it was really nice. Oh yeah, okay. So, again, where this movie got really Terry Gilliam was when they're fighting the evil genius at the end of it, and then all of a sudden there's archers. And there's cowboys, and there's knights, and there is a tank, and there's a spaceship. And it's like, okay, this went full Terry Gilliam here. So it's
well, it almost felt a little bit like the end of Blazing Saddles,
a little bit, where it gets just completely absurd. Like, oh no, they're on a lot, they're on all that kind of stuff. So I get that. I enjoyed.
It was okay
watching this movie again. I don't know that I would go back and rewatch it though. Maybe in another 40 years.
I've seen it twice now. I feel like I'm kind of
I kind of and it did the whole. Oh, at the end when the supreme being, when God comes in, which they actually do finally call him God during that part. When he comes in and he's telling that he's fixing everything, he destroys evil.
No, he's not fixing anything. He's making them clean up.
Oh yeah, he's making them clean up. But he like fix it. He like turns the evil genius, the devil, basically into around. I guess it's
charred.
Yeah, some kind of
basically charcoal,
graphite or something. Yeah, exactly. And he tells him you have to pick up all the pieces and put them in this receptacle.
Yeah, and he's talking to the main guy, and he's like, hey, he's like, no, he's like, and of course they're apologizing. We didn't mean to steal it. He's like, look, the only reason I let you borrow it, you would not have gotten this if I had not wanted you to have it, and they're like, he's like, well, do you think we could come back to work for you? He's like, yes. And I'm going to start you at this lower level and you're going to take a 19% pay cut. And they're like, okay, sure. Yes. But that whole, make sure you get it all. Of course, there's the one piece that gets away. And then, I remembered this movie having a real downer ending of both of his parents just disintegrate right in front of him. Yeah. And he's just standing there. And it's funny because, like, the fire department just leaves. Yep. All of his neighbors start going back into their houses, and he's just standing out there on the front lawn by himself,
this charred house
with his parents' shoes just laying.
Yeah, and there's just smoke coming out of it.
House is burnt down, parents are dead, and everybody walks off and leaves him.
Yeah,
so.
and it's just, and that's the end of the movie. It's like,
oh, so this is a Gen X movie. Yeah,
well, yeah, very much so. But it kind of goes into, there were several movies that had that kind of in the 80s. There was a movie called The Earthling. Do you remember? Did you ever see that? It's got Ricky Schroeder. And I forget who else. Hold up. Let me pull up because really and truly.
Dang, it's a big tree rat.
What, you see the squirrels out there?
Yeah, that's a big one.
Okay, it's William Holden. It came out in 1980. Okay, so it's right around the same.
Okay.
And William Holden, he's Australian, and he's going back to Australia because he's been told that he doesn't have a whole lot of time to live.
Yeah.
And Ricky Schroeder and his parents are on vacation they've got an RV, and they're on vacation. They're going around Australia.
Okay.
And his parents are trying to move. He's not in the RV with them, but they're trying to back the RV up, and they wind up going off a cliff and getting killed. And so he's stuck in the outback by himself. And William Holden just happens to come across him, and he's basically teaching him how to survive. You know, it's one of those things where, like, it starts off as he doesn't approach him right away. He's kind of from a distance. He's kind of like he's taking two rocks and hitting them together and trying to get him to follow. And he's like being real, like, hands off with the kid, but he's trying to, like, show him like this is where he is, this, you know, kind of stuff. And it's one of those things that, like, it's the rest of the movie is about them kind of cutting across the outback together. And it's one of those things that William Holden's character dies at the end of it. But by that point, Ricky Schroeder's character knows how to get to. He's like, he tells him, like, you know, city's right over, you know, just 3 miles, 4 miles that way or whatever, you know, kind of stuff. So he winds up walking out of the outback by himself after losing his parents and this mentor that's come along. It's like the early 80s loved to do that kind of stuff to kids. You know, you had, like, again, Ricky Schroeder. You ever see The Champ?
No.
Him and
there were so many of those Ricky Schroeder movies.
It was him, and it
Thanks
was
to Silver Spoons.
What's his name? Midnight Cowboy, Angelina Jolie's dad. See his face. You know who I'm talking about. But I know. I hate that I have to go and look it up, or you have to go look it up. 'Cause, like, I should know this off the top of my head. But it's a whole thing where, like, he's a boxer. That's why they call him the champ, you know. And at the end of the movie, you know, when they're, you know, and I think Ricky Schroeder is his kid, or if he's not his kid, then John Voight, yeah. At the end of the movie, he dies after the bout's over, like in the back in the locker room. He gets beat so badly that he winds up dying, and it's this whole thing where it's like, right, you know, he's like Ricky Schroeder, you know, he's like really young at the time, you know, he's like, you know, champ, no, don't go. I mean, just like, it's one of those type movies.
Wait, I think
all of a sudden and it's like, yeah, it's one of those. It's like, there was something
may be one of those movies that I blocked out.
I know there was something about the early 80s with, like, hey, let's make these movies where, like,
no wonder we have Batman syndrome. We have Batman syndrome. That's why I'm such a big fan of Batman.
And then, of course, you know, that what were the movies that they always wanted to, like, truck in for us to watch? It was Old Yeller and Where the Red Fern Grows, and, you know, Watership Down, like all this stuff where it's like, why are you forcing this trauma on us at young ages? You know, it's like
everybody dies at the end, kid. You might as well get used to it.
Yeah, you know, I mean, that's, you know,
aversion therapy.
And then we had, you know, movies like Red Dawn, and, you know, would just like
and people wonder why our generation is so feral.
Yes, and why we have such a dark sense of humor. It's like, yeah, no, that's how we've learned to deal with stuff over the years, is because of movies like Time Bandits, and, you know, and any number of other movies where it's like, no, kid, you're on your own. You're on your own. Good luck with that. So
figure it out yourself.
Yeah.
Maybe you survive and don't end up on on
a milk carton. I know. Yeah, exactly. So it's So our dark sense of humor became a coping mechanism, and it's
yeah.
But yeah, I'm sure if I thought, I could probably come up with several more movies like that all had.
I think we're
really
starting to
dark
zero in on like our generation's trauma.
Well, there was that whole. I have seen the meme. I'm sure you have too, about the whole. It's from the Neverending Story with Atreyu and Artak when he's in the bog of sorrow, and it's like, he just gives up. And it's like, this is where we learned. It's like, okay, you just have to put your head down and keep going. It's like, hey, your best friend just died in front of you. Well, time to keep going.
Yep.
So
if you don't keep going, you're going to end up in the same place.
Spot. Yeah, I know.
Did your friend die?
Yep.
Loot the corpse.
Yep.
And move along with your campaign.
Absolutely.
Hope your next roll is a 20 and not a 1.
It's funny because there's a couple of Dungeons and Dragons episodes of Community that's pretty good. I know I was really surprised with how good Community turned out to be. Like I said, it did not stick the ending like it could or should have, but there are some really good. It was the friends we made along the way. It wasn't the destination.
But I mean, our generation is very tied to Dungeons and Dragons and tabletop.
Yeah, because it was like you're going to die and go to hell if you play Dungeons and Dragons.
Oh, I am definitely playing that game to see what that's about.
I know.
Or some of us were already playing that game, and they said that, and we were like, "What are you talking about?"
Well, for me, it was heavy metal music. Oh, you're not supposed to listen to this stuff. Well, obviously, I want to listen to this stuff now. Well, it's.
If you were playing Dungeons and Dragons, you were listening to heavy metal music.
But I didn't. I was not a Dungeons and Dragons. I've never played Dungeons and Dragons. Yeah. And I don't really feel like I've missed out on anything. I have seen other people play.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, there's a lot of sitting around not doing a whole lot.
No, it's all in your head.
Yeah.
It's a game of imagination and creativity.
Yeah. No, I like, I was always more of a, if I were going to play something like that, I'd be more into like Warhammer.
Yeah.
With the little figure, the little miniatures and all that kind of stuff. I'm very visual. I am very hands-on.
You're also very much into minute detail.
And there's that also.
Because as Henry Cavill says, that's a 2-part game.
Yeah.
There is the painting the characters, and then there is playing with the characters.
Right.
And you're a very detailed sit down
and spend hours and hours
with a tiny little brush and some
painting all of this stuff.
And that would drive me absolutely insane.
Yeah, see, that again. That would be me listening to heavy metal and sitting there with a paintbrush and just going through all the
same style geek, just a different version of it. And with Dungeons and Dragons, depending on the group you're playing with, there were miniatures with Dungeons and Dragons, just not to the extent that Warhammer was.
A big part of that collection of stuff that Brody and I got a year ago was a bunch of the Dungeons and Dragons miniatures.
Yeah.
From the mid-'70s on up, into the early 90s.
Back when Gary Gygax was still doing the album covers.
Yeah. Dude, did you hear what happened? Dungeons and Dragons had its 50th anniversary not that long ago, and they completely it's Wizards of the Coast own them now, and they are destroying
Wizards.
I mean, matter of fact, they basically, because apparently I did not know this until recently, Dungeons and Dragons is huge in Brazil.
Well,
I mean,
here's the thing,
huge in Brazil.
I think Wizards of the Coast sold them out to Hasbro at this point.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
It's Hasbro.
Hasbro's the one that's doing. That's right. It is. It was Hasbro acquired Wizards of the Coast.
Right.
That's what it is. And so it's Hasbro that's doing. But I did not know that Dungeons and Dragons was huge in Brazil. I mean, like huge.
It's huge
Brazil.
everywhere.
I mean, like apparently Brazil was like really big into it, and Hasbro basically said, I forget exactly what the whole thing. Something happened with copyright stuff or whatever, and basically said, "Fine, we're not going to sell stuff in Brazil any longer." And it was like, well, so you're cutting one of your main arteries here.
One of the biggest things that happened when Hasbro bought them, any in-game intellectual creation of the players
Yeah, Hasbro now owns. I know.
Hasbro now owns because you're playing their game.
I think that's what it was with Brazil, where they were like, no, we're not. No, you're not.
No.
What are you going to do? And they were like, well, fine. We just won't sell the stuff down there. Have you heard the latest on that? It just hit yesterday.
No.
They have gutted it so badly at Hasbro. They have done so much damage to Dungeons and Dragons that all of the 5th edition stuff has been slashed in half now.
It doesn't
price wise. Like you could go and pick it up for next to nothing now.
It makes me
basically like, and Hasbro has basically said in the last few months, we don't want to deal with that any longer.
Yeah, they're gonna gut it, and dump it, and you're not gonna be able to find it.
But what I was getting my original was that they had some kind of 50th anniversary deal for it, and completely cut Gygax. And who was the other guy? It was Gary Gygax and Gary
Gygax.
I
can't remember
the other. Completely cut that guy completely out of it. Didn't invite Gygax to the event, but completely disavowed that this other guy was involved in it at all.
Yeah,
and it was just like, what? No, okay. I was like, look, I understand that like George Lucas doesn't own Star Wars any longer, but if you're having some kind of like when they're having the 50th anniversary event, he's going to be there.
Yeah,
you have to talk about it. I mean, that's just. And that's Disney's done a lot of shitty stuff. But I don't think they're going to completely freeze him out.
It makes me glad.
You never know with him these days, but
that with the occurrence of McKay's, I was able to go back and get
they have got a crap ton of stuff over there.
A good big chunk of my 2nd edition stuff back.
Yeah. It's too bad you couldn't have bought some of that stuff we had last year. I know you were like, I don't have the money right now.
I didn't have the money.
But I know you were looking at it going, oh my God, I can't believe you guys have all this stuff.
Like the Wizards compendiums.
Yeah.
You had 2 of the 5.
I had all of them.
I've got 3 of them.
Right.
I needed the other 2.
Yeah. We had all 5 of them.
I know.
And we had double copies of a couple of them. So,
but what y'all were asking, I just didn't have the money.
Yeah, we were like, and again, if it had just been us, I would have cut.
Yeah, but you were doing it. We were doing it for somebody else who needed the money, and
right.
I can't fault you for that.
Yeah,
but I was like, I really need these.
Yeah, that was a lot. We had a lot of stuff, and I think I've talked about it on here. I wound up getting a ton. I haven't got a complete set of all of them, but I wound up getting most of the Marvel superheroes role-playing game TSR put out in the 80s. I got almost all of that stuff. Yeah. I'm only just a handful of the packs that I don't have. One of them being the main game. Like, I don't have that, but I have like all of the other stuff.
I've got a handful of the original GURPS stuff.
Yep.
Like Warehouse 31 and some of that other stuff.
We used to sell a ton of that stuff at Hobbytown.
GURPS. Well, the thing about GURPS,
I know because it's generic, it can work with anything.
With Jackson Games, they figured out how to make it generic, so you could bring in Dungeons and Dragons and incorporate cyberpunk, which was when you suddenly have techno wizards. That's kind of fun.
Oh yeah, we used to sell cyberpunk stuff. We used to sell, of course, Games Workshop was huge at the time, and. I mean, we sold the crap out of Warhammer and Warhammer 40K stuff. Yeah. And of course, Dungeons and Dragons was in there. Of course, Vampire the Masquerade, this is in the late 90s. That was a big deal at the time. Of course, we sold a ton of the GURPS. I'm trying to think what else. Those were like our main things. The Games Workshop stuff was the main. I mean, like the Warhammer and the Warhammer 40K was the main stuff that we sold. But it was funny.
And by the way, it appears that Steve Jackson and Steve Jackson Games is actually still
doing it,
producing GURPS, and you can get it on Amazon, which I hate. But
yeah, it's funny because I was thinking about this the other day when I worked at Hobbytown, and that year that I worked there was a lot of fun for many reasons. The thing that got me though was that I worked there. I was in college at the time, and that was my part-time job that I did while I was going to classes for about a year. And I was kind of going through I don't know. I was really into the music that I was into, so I was kind of a little pseudo goth a little bit, And it was funny.
We all went through our goth phase. I still have some goth in me.
And I always say pseudo goth because I never went full on with it, But it was a lot of black and, metal T-shirts and even, black fingernail polish. And I dyed my hair black at one time because I had like long hair. And
back when you had hair?
Yeah, when I had like a full head of hair back when I was in my early 20s. And it was funny because like people would come in and look at me and they're like, oh, so you're a gamer. Because back then being a gamer meant you played, tabletop game stuff. This is before video games really kind of took over all of that. And I was always like, no. And they would look at me like, what? And I'm like, no, I don't game. They're like, really? No, I don't. But I mean, I would hear that like 2 or 3 times a day. People would come, oh, you're a gamer. No, I'm not.
Well, that's because a lot of us gamers.
I know. And it was funny because the 2 things that we sold was all the tabletop game stuff. And the other thing was RC cars.
Yeah.
That was like our other big.
And like model cars. And that.
Well, it was the RC cars was the next big thing that we sold a lot of. And it was always one of those things that I would like sit there and look out at the parking lot whenever a car would pull up. And I could always tell our customers. I could always tell our customers
RC car.
It was one, and I could tell you what they were coming in for always. And we had
a look. I'm not gonna.
Yeah, and there was also the whole. But that was back in my.
But back when we were gaming, there was also a lot of Bauhaus and.
Yeah. Well, that was also back in my pretentious days. And
wait. What do you mean back in your pretentious days?
Back when I was young and pretentious, let's put it that way, because I would correct people's English and I probably should have gotten my butt kicked more than a few times. And
you're just not aware of the times you turned around and walked off and somebody held them off of you.
In the store,
Well, you had a counter between you and
I had a counter between me and the whatever. And it was funny because, again, it was like many times because with the people that I worked with, they were always telling me the stuff because they knew I would find it funny. It was like somebody came in the other day and asked where the little weird kid was or whatever. I was like, let me guess, UT ball cap, probably wearing a NASCAR T-shirt of some sort. Yeah, how'd you know? I was like, because that's half of our customer base. It's like they all thought I was weird. Yeah, where's the little weird kid?
Yeah.
And then the gamers were always like, so where is that guy who looks like a gamer but isn't one?
Yeah. Where's the poser at?
Yeah, it was always those. It was like whatever.
Where's that stupid poser at?
Mm-hmm. But yeah,
But it's your fault that I've got all of those stupid crow card.
Dude,
like Pokemon card type thing.
I know I gave you all those, didn't I? All the ones I had, didn't I? I know we bought. Well, it was a card game. Yeah. It was like because that was when card games like Magic the Gathering had only been around a few years at that point, and it really started picking up. And I mean, it had really started picking up. But there was also a Star Wars game that was out at that time, and there were all these they were doing all these collectible card games that were really big, and there was one for the Crow.
Yeah.
That never like really picked up or anything. So we wound up buying because I know
we bought the box
because Dwayne had them marked down because he couldn't get rid of them, and so we wound up pooling our money together and buying the
entire box.
The buying box, and then we never played.
Yeah.
And they sat around for a long time. I think I wound up giving you all of mine, didn't I?
I don't know.
I'm almost positive. Eventually, I was like, "Here, you can just."
I'm sure they're over in all the junk at my house somewhere. I'm actually thinking about getting one of those sheds to put out back of my house and like building my own office out there and putting up all this stuff.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, I've kind of what I'm doing here.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways.
Building my own little private studio out there.
That's thanks for saying studio rather than man cave. I hate that terminology. There are certain terms that I absolutely cannot stand.
Well, by studio, I mean like
recording studio. Yeah, I know.
Not recording studio, but like a little small production studio.
Yeah, I get that.
That's that type of stuff.
And that's what I've always talked about with this. Like when I talk about studio and then studio 2.0 and 2.3, it's like, or 3.0. It was one of those where like, I have my stuff in here, like all my collectible stuff and everything. But it's not just like, oh, I'm going to go hang out in there. Like, even when I was married, I didn't have like my little, oh, I'm going to go over here and get away from everybody. It was just, no, this is where I keep my stuff. Yeah. And if I'm in there, it's because I'm working on something. Yeah. I'm not just going in there and hanging out to avoid everybody in the house. It's like, no, I'm in there working on something if I'm doing it. So, and that's still the way it is here. You know, if I'm back here in this studio, it's because I'm working on something.
Yeah, it's like, so, I mean, I've got my office in the house, but it's gotten to the point to where,
yeah, I know,
it's kind of become a catch-all for everything.
And that, again, what I was talking about in the previous episode, of now a year in, I'm like, no, I've got to start getting this stuff organized, or else I'm going to wind up with a bunch of catch-all, and I don't want that. Yeah. I completely do not want that whatsoever.
And if I do it, I've got to get one that's going to be big enough, because it's going to be where I keep the radio stuff at. Right, it's where I keep some other stuff at. It's where I'm going to have eventually I'm getting one of these podcasting rigs for my place.
Well, you saw what I did in my living room with all my guitars, where all of a sudden they became art on the walls instead of, they're not just like, taking up room or sitting in their cases. Right. I'm like, no, I got them hanging on the walls now. They're organized. They look nice, all that kind of stuff. But, that's several $1,000s worth of guitars that are hanging in there. And it's just, I hate to say I'm getting to kind of be a little more of an adult, but I guess I'm kind of getting to be a little more of an adult at 50. And, I guess that happened to all of us eventually, but I still have He-Man figures up there, and I still have, it's a...
I'm doing all the adult stuff. It would just be nice, but it seems like it's literally work, home, sleep, work, home, sleep. And I'm not getting to do... a lot of the fun things.
Something I had to do recently.
And I don't think I'm ever going to get to retire. I don't think the money's going to be there for me to be able to
I've never thought that I was going to retire. Something that I've had to do recently that was absolutely essential for me to get anything done is that I had to disconnect my Xbox and put it up.
See, I've never hooked my Xbox up to the internet. In fact, I don't even really play the thing anymore. Yeah. I've got too much other stuff going on.
My whole thing is I would just endlessly, like when I would come home, I would just go in there and plop down in front of the TV and start playing Madden. Yeah. And hours would go by, hours and hours and hours. And then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, it's 1:00 in the morning. I've got to get up in the morning, and it's like, and I just spent hours doing nothing whatsoever. Why am I doing this? It was one of those things. A couple of years ago, I had no, I still had the Switch, but Xander pretty much was playing that all the time. And even when I started playing it, it usually was just in spurts. It wasn't an all the time thing, and I got rid of my PS4 that I had because I was like, this is just taking up way too much of my time. I got rid of everything, and I was a lot more productive for all that time. And then last year, all of a sudden, I got a burr under my saddle about wanting to get another gaming system. And I did all of the, I'll use this. This will be, for playing, this will be my Blu-ray player, and this, this and that, and blah, blah, blah. It can be it's a media center, not just a, no, I just wound up doing the same thing over again.
I remember you giving me those arguments when I asked.
I know.
And are you really wanting to do this?
And no, what it wound up being was a time suck completely. And so I'm like, you know what? I don't need this. This can go away. This is, and since I finally unhooked it a couple of weeks ago, I've gotten a lot done all of a sudden. It's like, oh, wow, I'm not distracted by this thing any longer. I'm not tempted by it any longer because I not only unhooked it, completely unhooked it from the television, I wiped it completely. So if I ever do go and put it back in again, I'm going to have to go through all the updates, and reinstalling all the games and all that kind of stuff. It's like, you know what? I'm good. I don't need to do any of this. Yeah. No. So, yeah.
Yeah, but I haven't really touched a gaming system in forever.
Well,
and I still have all of my gaming systems. Somewhere in the house is the Sears Atari 2600. Oh, yeah. Somewhere in the house is my original PlayStation. Now, on the TV, although it's not hooked up because I need to get the adapters to hook it up to my new TV because it's still still RCA instead of HDMI.
Does it have the S-video?
It's the RCA.
I know
red, blue, green. But I don't have the adapter to go from my original Xbox to
it's
HDMI.
Like, if you look over,
I don't have the cables I need to hook up Renee's Nintendo to the new TV.
Oh yeah,
because it's RCA. And
you don't have the coaxial cable for it?
No.
Oh, okay.
Well, the TV that I've got now doesn't have the coaxial on it.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll go ahead and tell you this right now.
I need the adapters to be able to hook it in via
the problem.
HDMI.
The problem with hooking up like the NES to a new television.
No. It's the Wii.
Oh, okay.
I need the adapter to get from the Wii to an HDMI.
Okay, yeah, good. I was going to say, because the whole thing with NES, if you hook it up to a flat screen, is that you can't play certain games, and there is a lag between the two. And I say, if you look, over there, I've got that old CRT that I've had for 20 years. Well, so you hung on to. But the thing is, if you look over there, there's a Wii, there's an NES, and there's an original Xbox.
Yeah, that's my Xbox. That's the one I've got.
Yeah, and it's that where it's like, I've got all that stuff over there that I'm like, okay, cool. I can play it on this television the way it's supposed to be played. Yeah. Because it's all made for that kind of stuff. I do have the Switch. Actually, we have two Switches. Andrew has one now, and I have the original one that I had. I don't really play a whole lot anymore, but he does. And that's kind of been one of those things where it's like, okay, I got him his own, so he can just, because he never plays on the TV. He's always in handheld. So I'm like, all right, fine. I got him one of the lights so he can just like take it with him and have a good time and all that stuff.
And really the only game the only games I really ended up picking up and playing on Xbox after I quit playing was either Need for Speed Underground 2, Halo 2, and Tiger Woods Golf. And usually it was just Tiger Woods Golf.
I think I have Halo and Halo 2 down there, if I'm not mistaken. I know I have at least Halo.
Oh, and Fable.
All
the Fables.
I love Fable.
Love the Fables.
And that was part of the whole reason of me getting an Xbox, because they had announced a new Fable game. And I was like, okay. But the thing is we still don't know when it's going to be out. Yeah. And I'm like, all right, you know what? No, never mind. And you know what's really kind of cool is that they've started porting a bunch of like older games over. Like they just ported Red Dead, the first Red Dead Redemption to the Switch, and it also has Red Dead Nightmare with it. And I'm like, no, that's exactly if I were going to. Because I tried playing Red Dead 2 and I really didn't like it.
But it's downloadable, right?
You can download it or you can buy it on the cart as well. Yeah, Nintendo's still doing the little carts and stuff, which I'm all about the physical. I still will buy all that stuff.
Thank you for finally listening to me.
As far as games go, I have been doing that. I never went digital on that stuff because I like having that because, again, if I decide I want to sell it, I want to be able to actually sell all the individual stuff rather than losing all, because you can't sell digital. Yeah. And I've gone back and forth on, we've talked about this before, but my justification for going digital was like, no, I'll put it all on this hard drive and then I'll have it here and I can watch it whenever. I'm not worried about streaming or whatever and blah, 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 until the hard drive died.
And then you lost everything.
And so then I'm like, you know what? Blu-rays are inexpensive for the most part. So I have built a huge Blu-ray collection now. And I'm like, I'm just going to keep on doing this. I have again, kind of like with the albums we were talking about off air earlier, I have a list of movies that I'm looking for on Blu-ray. And I'm always looking for them. Like, okay, I can get this. Okay, I get this, And because the thing is that like, there are several movies that I have over the last year or so. I'm going to watch that. It's not streaming on anything. So if I have it on my shelf, I can just go over there and pull it off and watch it.
The next thing I really want to do is I want to build a small server with a lot of storage space on it. Because I have found a program.
Plex is great for that.
Well, that's what I'm talking about, is building a Plex server. Because I've found a free software that will allow you to take a Blu-ray. Once I get a Blu-ray player for my computer, it'll let you take a Blu-ray and transfer it, actually rip it into an MKV?
MKV are great. I love MKV.
And then you can store it and put it on your Plex server, and then you can still stream it. Like, as long as the computer...
As long as you can stream.
Well, as long as the computer at home is hooked up, I can watch those movies anywhere. Right.
And I like that idea. Yeah. I really do. And I was looking into that. That was part of me. Yeah. All the stuff on the hard drive was like part of me was thinking about doing that until the hard drive died.
Well, I still own the physical media.
Right.
So if I do it right and I have the redundancy, where I'm running it in some kind of form of RAID, if I have a hard drive die, I can pull the hard drive out and put a new one in.
Yeah.
But you've got to set up the RAID. However,
Yeah, I know. And believe me, I know people who are really into doing all that stuff. And it's one of those things I never learned. And I've gone and looked at it, and I'm like,
I don't have the first clue. I'm going to have to learn how to do it. So I figure at some point I should be able to find I won't say cheap, but inexpensive. I'm starting to see like older Dell servers for sale on like Marketplace.
I know I've talked to you about this several times about setting up a server here at the house.
Yeah.
For
purposes.
For this, as well as some other stuff. Nothing illegal, obviously, but it just not wanting to be dependent on someone else's server, basically. Or getting into a situation where hosting all of a sudden decides that, well, we're not hosting certain kinds of opinions any longer or whatever, to where I'm like, screw you, I can just host it myself. I know someone who wound up having to do that because of a blog that they ran, and they wound up just setting up a server at their house, and they didn't have to worry about it any longer. So it was just like, all right, there you go. So of course then you got to have a webmaster and all that kind of stuff. You have to know how to do it, yourself, and that requires learning a whole other set of skills that I just do not have. Yeah, unfortunately. So.
Me either.
Yeah. So we talked about Time Bandits for about 35 minutes, and then we spent another 30 minutes talking about other stuff. Would you recommend Time Bandits?
Everybody should see it once.
Yeah, I think
and understand that before you watch it, it is Monty Python adjacent. Mm-hmm. So you're going to have that Monty Python, Terry Gilliam weirdness in it.
Mm-hmm. And it is very weird.
And if you understand that that's where it's coming from, you should have an okay time.
Let's put it this way. There is one word that goes across here, and it was with Monty Python, and it's with Terry Gilliam movies, and it's called absurdity. Okay? This movie is very absurd.
Yeah.
And it may not be, it's not comedy. There's some funny moments, but it's not a comedic film. It is very much a fantasy film, is what it is.
It's a fantasy adventure.
Yes, and it's a lot of fun. But, well, it's fun. It's fun. It's fun.
I don't know that it's a lot of fun.
It's fun.
It's fun.
It's fun. And it, like I said, it does. There are some comedic moments in it here and there, that kind of stuff. But it's a lot darker than I remembered it being.
Yeah.
It does have a bummer ending. And I could see somebody watching this movie and having a slight existential crisis afterwards.
Well, it's almost the same kind of existential crisis that you would get after watching Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Yeah, something like that.
Yeah.
It's better yet reading. That movie was all right.
It was okay.
It was all right.
The book is so much better.
Yeah, I know, and I thought that they did a good job of casting with putting Sam Rockwell in it, because I like Sam Rockwell. Definitely Time Bandits. It's available on Max. I'm sure it's available elsewhere. I didn't even really look to see. I knew it was there, so I'm like, all right, well, at least
we know it's on Max. If you need to go, you can go and search and go, where's this stream?
Yeah, go to Just Watch. I'm telling you, download the Just Watch app on your phone.
Really?
That will tell you where it's streaming, where it's available for.
Okay.
All that stuff.
I guess
That's
we're
where I always
that
go
app
to.
then.
I've had it for over a year now. I used to just go to their website and I found out they had an app, and I'm like, okay, so I downloaded that, and it's wonderful because you just plug it, and you put a movie in, and it'll tell you where it's streaming, where it's available to buy, all that kind of stuff. So, Terry Gilliam's Time Bandits. It's I don't know. It's about a 3-star movie, somewhere in the middle out of 5. It's kind of in the middle. It's kind of 2.5, 3, somewhere in there.
It's in there somewhere.
It's definitely of its time, and it's worth a watch. Let's put it this way: it's a good Terry Gilliam starter pack. Let's put it that way.
Yeah,
it's a good place to start, and then you can go on to Brazil and everything.
Adventures
else.
of Baron von
Munchausen and Tideland, and I'm trying to think what else he's
Discworld stuff.
Yeah,
isn't that him? I think Discworld is Terry.
Well, he was trying to make and I think he finally did complete it, but it took him like 20 years to do movie of Don Quixote. And there is a great documentary called Lost in La Mancha talking about the production of the movie because it literally went through natural disasters and a civil war and all kinds of stuff that happened on the movie around the production of this movie.
Well, the movie became his own windmill.
It really did. It really did in a lot of ways. So, he was very much tilting at windmills for this movie. So it's okay. Let me ask you this before we get out of here.
Okay.
Have you read Don Quixote, or do you at least have a passing?
I have a passing knowledge of Don Quixote.
The whole thing with Don Quixote is that he lost his mind.
Right.
And so he had this companion who was trying to keep him, on the right, but he kept seeing him. Like, do you know what the reason in the book was that he lost his mind?
No, I don't.
Don Quixote lost his mind because he read too much.
Really?
Mm-hmm. Here's when the printed word became available to everyone. There were a lot of scholars in the intellectual type who said that this was going to be the end of society because people weren't going to talk to each other anymore. They were going to read too much, and it was going to drive people insane. Okay?
Yeah.
Fast forward after that. You get past that, you get to radio. Yeah. Radio is going to destroy.
Then TV.
Then movies, then music,
video
rock
games.
And roll, video games. There's always something that's going to destroy society because, people aren't going to talk to each other anymore. They're not going to, we're going to lose this intellectual whatever. That was the whole thing with television.
Hold on.
That was the whole thing with television and movies. People aren't going to read anymore.
Hold on.
So therefore it's
They've tried several methods, but they may have succeeded with the internet.
This is true.
Because people don't talk to each other anymore.
No, they just yell at each other. That's all they do.
And let's face it, the smarts of the world have gone down. We thought, free access or easy access to all the knowledge of the world should make everybody smarter.
When I first learned about the internet, which was AOL back in the mid-90s.
Oh, yeah.
That's how most everybody learned about it. I thought this was the greatest thing ever. I am going to have access to all the knowledge of the world. And I, like most everyone else, found out that no, having an internet connection means you're just getting in chat rooms. That's all you're doing. You're not really learning anything. You're learning stuff, but not what you.
There was an education to be had in the
There was an
AOL
education.
chat room.
There was an education to be had, but not the one you think. and then we're where we are now, and it's like, oh yeah. So
now we have people pooping in litter boxes.
Anyway, we won't get into all that stuff. So anyways, guys, so we had a good time. I enjoyed rewatching this movie once. I will probably never do it again, but I do suggest going and watching it.
Yeah.
So we will be back real soon with another episode. I think we're going to jump back into 1999 and talk about the movies because there's a lot of good movies that came out that year.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
There's going to be some that I'm going to mention that I'm sure you've forgotten about.
There may be, but we're going to go down the line because I guarantee there, and we're going to at a later date. There is a book that was written a few years ago that was called Best Movie Year Ever, and it's about the year 1999. And I gave Dave my copy of the book, and I have recently completed listening to the audio book because that's the only way I absorb information any longer. And we're going to cover that as well as a separate episode because we really need to dive into certain movies a little more than just going down the list of what all was released and talking about the year overall. So yeah, stay with us. We'll be back with our next episode. Go to the show notes for all of our social media and most definitely Discord. If you're not a member of Discord, go and join if you need to. And so for the Project Gen X podcast, I am Alan Smith.
I am the other guy, Big Dave.
And we will see you next time.
See you.